This week on MS Refresh, all that is new, all that is great, and all that is underwhelming in Microsoft Teams for August 2022. Plus, maybe some updates to Teams Rooms licensing? Question mark. It's a bit of a roller coaster, so we'll see. All that and more. Subscribe to stay in the know. This is the MS Refresh Show. Hi there, and welcome to the Matt and Sean 365 Refresh Show. This is episode 69. Nice. For the work week of August 22, 2022. And this month's episode is devoted to Microsoft Teams news. Coming to you live, sort of, from the West Coast. My name is Sean Bugler.
And from the East Coast, my name is Matt Wade.
Matt Wade, how are you?
I'm doing well. Hey, congratulations.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. I have completely already blacked it out of my head. For those of you that aren't regular watchers of the show or you haven't caught up with us in a little bit, 2 years ago, I went back to college because I thought to myself, I've got too much money.
Wait, I live in the Bay Area and I have too much money. Nobody's ever said that.
I have too much money. I have too much free time. And I have too much money. And so I went back to school to finish my bachelor's degree, something that I did not do the first time 14 years ago. So as we're recording this, August 19th. So as of 10 days ago, I am officially graduated. I finally have a bachelor's of science from Arizona State University. Is it the most prestigious school? Yes. No, I appreciate it. I'm so glad to be done. I'm so tired. And I just cannot wait to get back to having just a little bit more free time in my world. So what's new in your world, man?
So not a whole lot, really. I guess the interesting thing going on in our hometown is that HBO is here to film the second season of The Gilded Age, which is sort of the Americanized version of Downton Abbey. Same producers or creators, I forget which it is. So not only has that affected my workplace, where they've been filming nearby at churches and in front of the old brownstones, but actually my apartment complex itself is partially closed down because they're using it as the backdrop for a scene related to Pittsburgh steel mills, I guess. So it's been kind of interesting.
So your apartment complex looks like it's from the Gilded Age?
It is a former mill, textile mill from the 1870s and 80s. So it really aligns with the time frame they're in anyway, which is the 1880s.
Huh. Yeah. The more you know. That's cool. Have you managed to sneak your way into the back of any shots?
No, I'm not an extra, although they did have plenty of opportunities for people to be extras, but I ain't got time for that. But I hang around. They really don't, like, they care, obviously, if you walk by, but like they're not, other than like literally the 100 feet of the street or whatever, where they have the dirt and all the, for the road, the stagecoaches, the horses and whatnot for the actual set. They don't really care if you're hanging around and watching. And when they're not filming, you can just walk around. It's kind of interesting how loosey-goosey it seems to be.
No, I totally get that. So when I lived in North Carolina, near Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where a ton of like TV show filming happens, I at one point was like walking down the street of downtown Wilmington, and I saw people filming, and there were these guys on each corner of a street, and I was like, "What's going on?" They're filming an episode of One Tree Hill. I think that's what it was. And I was like, "Oh, so like, what are you doing?" He says, "I'm the boundary of the shot. So anything past me is the shot." And I said, "Oh, so I got to wait." And he said, No, you can go. You just can't stop.
So they actually allowed passersby for the background then?
Yeah, it was kind of cool. Cool. I am man who crosses the street, because as soon as I crossed the street, they had to like get my name. I
was going to say, I'm surprised you didn't have to sign a waiver or something.
Oh yeah. As soon as I crossed it, somebody stopped me on the other side, and they were like, "You got to sign this." And I don't know if this is like standard protocol, but yeah. I am like man who crosses the street in one of the episodes.
Well, you can't do that here because you have to be in like a top hat and like, coat and tails for men.
I can see that working against you.
For women, they are in the full on like, like the big rear, almost like it's there's a shelf hanging off the rear end because the dresses were so big. So that's what you see people walking around in on a random basis these days here.
Huh. Well, that's going to be fun to see. I can't
Yeah.
wait to see it live. I imagine I'll be interested to hear from your perspective how the differential between seeing it live and seeing it on TV, like how the contrast ends up being.
Yeah, they
Um,
did
this
this
is
first season last summer in one of the cities nearby me, and I checked that out. I didn't watch while they were filming it itself, but it's amazing. I expected that they were only going to show, these little upstate New York cities, right, for like a couple minutes, maybe max. And it was like, no, like
sure
actually,
like
it was
establishing shots.
yeah, it was primary outside shots. Like they used the old little park in Troy, New York. My grandmother used to live there and had access to the park. It's one of the few privately owned parks left in New York City. I think there's only two, and
Ooh,
they used that as Central Park. And apparently, in the 1880s, before the full Statue of Liberty was delivered by the French, they sent over the torch. So they had just the torch in Central Park until the full statue came. So they had CGI'd in
really?
the torch in this small little Washington Park area that is half of a block in size, maybe, but like big enough and like greeny enough that you can't really see too far,
Sure.
so it looks bigger than it is. And I don't know, just kind of cool watching people walking out of these buildings. That one of them was the local funeral home that a lot of people go out of, right? And they're walking out of that building, and that's one of the buildings where somebody lives in the show, and then they walk across to Central Park because, of course, these rich people live on Central Park, and there's the torch for the Statue of Liberty in 1882 or whatever. It's pretty cool.
That is cool. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to seeing that. I had
yeah,
no idea that one, the show existed, and two, that it was filming in your town. This is awesome. I'm
yeah,
invested now.
yeah. Yeah, you
This
gotta
is
watch it.
also the part because inevitably the comments pop up. One or two of them, most of you are great. But every now and again, somebody says, "I came here for Microsoft content." Just so you know, we put chapters in the
I
description.
was gonna say that's
So
why we do chapters.
when you pull up these videos, if you don't care about Matt and Sean, the people, you care about Matt and Sean, the professionals, you can actually just click a neat little timestamp down here in the description, and it'll skip right to the news. That's for you. It lets us do our thing, lets you do yours. Everybody wins.
And on
With
that
that,
note, maybe it's time to do the news.
the news. Let's do it.
All right.
This is the news.
Hello there. We're back with another collection of exciting updates that are coming to the Teams universe, starting with meetings. The ability to pop out shared meeting content into a new window, including in government clouds, is on the way this month. The ability to enable language interpretation. This is going to let interpreters translate what speakers will say in real time, is on the way as well. Another feature coming online, Speaker Coach, will give you live feedback on your presentation skills. Meeting transcripts and attendance reports will be accessible to meeting organizers on iOS and Android. Next, if you have the automatic recording of your meeting feature enabled, it will automatically turn on transcription as well, something that was not true before. Really great for all of those who would like to have that transcript and maybe even be able to edit it after the fact. Meeting organizers will be able to pre-assign breakout room attendees in channel meetings, and you can choose from any channel member, not just the invitees. Viva Insights will categorize your meetings and give you a nudge if the meetings you attend aren't aligning with picture goals, which is going to be interesting when you consider a lot of the cross-functional work that many of us do. Let's see how that plays out. Teams Rooms also has a bunch of updates. Your room is getting a mute icon, so everyone in the room knows the mute status of that room. The ability to pin or hide the room video in the Teams Room display. The ability to get end-to-end encryption from Teams Rooms as long as both parties have encryption enabled, which makes sense end-to-end. The ability to join a Teams meeting from a Teams room using a meeting ID and passcode. This has been a big ask, and I know a lot of people are going to be really excited to see that. And enabling casting your Teams desktop app from your laptop to the Teams room for ad hoc meetings. And in the government clouds, specifically, live transcript is coming to GCC High, that's Government Community Cloud. Government Community Cloud High and DoD are also getting the attendance dashboard for meeting and webinar registration and attendance data. And lastly, we're finally seeing Together mode pushed out for all participants, rolling out to GCC High and DoD. Let's go ahead and turn our attention to collaboration. This is due this month in Teams. Admins will soon be allowed to enable Teams owners to allow members to manage tags in their team, meaning more people can help maintain Teams tags. This is coming to all clouds, including our favorite, the government community clouds. The ability to export approvals data within a selected time period. And also coming this month, the ability to block external users at any time during your one-on-one chat history with them, including when they first send an invitation to chat. If you block them after the invitation, they will lose access to your presence. 2, this is coming to all clouds, including all government clouds. This is going to be great, both from a harassment standpoint, as well as just, when a contract is done, be done with it. Wash your hands of it. For the education space, you're getting the Parent app, which lets you see the roster of parents and guardians for your students provided by your school, so you can initiate chats with them. And that just adds to the likely list of apps those parents and guardians have to have. And let's be real. Do you really want more interaction with your parents these days? Jumping over to admin, the ability to deploy teams to frontline workers with 1 PowerShell command and 2 CSV files, which lets you push out 500 teams and add up to 25 people per team. You can use this to add and remove members from existing teams too. I'm going to be really interested to see what that looks like in practice, because I know that a lot of admins have been looking for more streamlined ways of both deploying and managing teams, especially across large organizations. And also in the admin universe, the ability to customize your team's admin center homepage widgets. Exciting stuff. And lastly, some newsworthy roadmap items that are worth knowing about. So these are things that may not necessarily roll out this month, but have appeared and we think are really important, particularly for those of you who operate in the Microsoft Teams universe. The default layout for Teams meetings will be 7x7 instead of 3x3, meaning that the default view, the true size of the meeting, is going to be up to 49 squares visually. That's due in September for both commercial and GCC moderate. Meetings will soon support live translated captions using Azure's cognitive services. This is coming to all clouds, including, surprisingly, all government clouds. Particularly of note that Microsoft Stream in the government community clouds does not support transcripts at the moment here. So maybe that's also a harbinger of transcripts in Stream. And last but definitely most important, hold music is coming for call transfers next month. I cannot wait to play all the worst possible music.
That was the news.
Excellent, John. That was well.
Thank you very much. That's thank you as always for pulling together the news so that I Ron Burgundy have something to read.
And I do love throwing in those little things, because you will just read anything. So at some point
you're
going to make a personal and professional life altering choice to continue reading something that I write in here. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it'll happen at some point in the future. But anyway, what stood out for you this week?
There was a lot of interesting stuff happening in the team space. One quick highlight that I'm excited about that's not necessarily coming out this month, but is coming soon, of course, is that they're retiring the default 3x3 interface in lieu of the 7x7. Long time coming. I always felt like the 3x3 was needlessly constrained, and I would imagine that they saw from the data behind the scenes that most people were opting into the large gallery view anyways. I know I did anyways. What about you?
So I'm thinking 3x3 is probably just an artifact of an older time when they didn't have the power to be able to push the 7x7. And I don't think it's so much about pushing 7x7 as it is about pushing however many people join that's less than 50, just show them, right? Like just show everybody in the meeting and then let the dynamic view do its job. So I think 3x3 was probably holding that back, and there's just no reason to do that if people can come in. Now, I'm assuming that they're going to let people still choose to go to 3x3, but 3x3 is arbitrary, right? It used to be 2x2, right? And then they got rid of that for the 3x3. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a small thing, but I'm looking forward to that. I mean, it's just a little bit more flexibility in the long term.
Yep, definitely.
The second thing that I wanted to talk about here, so it's not quite Teams centric beer, but stay with me here. So, Matt, as you know, just a couple weeks ago was OneDrive's 15th birthday. Now, OneDrive has gone through a number of different iterations, from the Windows Live to SkyDrive to OneDrive for Business. It's gone through a lot of different evolutions here, and there's a lot of interesting announcements that come in the post that we're going to post in the show notes here. But one thing that I wanted to highlight here is the new OneDrive Home UI. So OneDrive is getting a little bit of a redesign. You know, they've been tweaking the share cards, and they've been tweaking the access experience and shared libraries and blah, blah, blah. But now we're seeing OneDrive, the core home experience, getting kind of revamped here. And Matt, does this look familiar to you?
It looks like the O365 hub. It looks like the new Stream Home. It looks like the home for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Looks very consistent, definitely.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad, that consistency. I think you and I talk about this a lot, that, using the same design language across teams is really important. Lowercase teams. That the consistency of design language across lowercase t teams is really important, because users need to understand kind of what their calls to action are. But my concern here, and the reason I'm bringing this up here, is this looks a whole lot, as you mentioned, like the Office.com home that was announced a little bit later last year. I think finally hit general availability earlier this year. I'm a little concerned about what Microsoft's long-term vision is for home, because there's the SharePoint home, there's now OneDrive home, there's Office home, and particularly through the lens of Teams, which they're positioning as being the home of work. Where is home? Is there any home? What's your perspective on this?
So even greater than that, the confusion that still abounds with respect to what OneDrive is. If you're syncing your files to your desktop, which is a best practice recommendation, right? Because even now from SharePoint, you can't open up a PDF in Acrobat desktop app, without having it sync. And that's a pretty common use case. Now, other file types, sure.
Here we go again with this niche PDFs. Nobody uses PDFs, Matt.
But pulling people away from the browser, or I guess the browser, or the file explorer experience and the syncing experience is definitely a preference for a lot of people, especially if they're coming from the world of having shared drives, or just being able to, old SharePoint open in File Explorer, right? And it was basically just pointing to that spot temporarily, and when you close the window, the connection was gone. It makes it even harder to bring people into the browser, because I think that people need to go to the browser. They need to look at OneDrive in the browser as their single source of truth, because if their sync is broken for some reason, their OneDrive in the browser is still going to be up to date, right? It's still going to have the right information. Also, search is
which unfortunately happens a lot. Like the sync client is not seamless.
Definitely not seamless. Yeah. I will say my Google Drive has been seamless since almost the day that I first used it for syncing, and OneDrive is not anywhere near the reliability of that. It's not like it happens every day. It's annoyingly frequent enough that
to the point that you have to understand that it's happening. Like you have to think about it. There are not magical little, file syncing elves that are doing all the magic. Like you have to think about, is my OneDrive sync client working?
Yeah. And to that point, there was actually a really good comment on one of my videos on YouTube where I cover which should you use, OneDrive, SharePoint, or Teams. And somebody pointed out that OneDrive shouldn't be seen as a file repository. It should be seen as your entry point to all your files, because OneDrive is going to show you files that are in any place, right? So if they're shared with you, it doesn't matter where they're shared from, as long as you have access, you're going to see them there. And the apps, the sync client on Windows and Mac OS is really just getting you access to that listing, right? And then the apps on mobile are actually a much better entry point, I think, than the desktop app, because it actually is the browser version, but on mobile. So the sort of long-winded conclusion to that point is that OneDrive is a difficult thing for people to understand because it's pulling information from SharePoint, from Teams, and from OneDrive itself, from the My Files. And like, yes, My Files is technically, your OneDrive, but now OneDrive is officially supposed to be bigger than that. So in this this page here that you have, this new home, right? This is just the recent page, but rebranded to look like what it looks like on the Office home and what it looks like on this Stream or Window or Word or Excel home in the browser. But the confusing part, and I was just looking at like the Office home, because I was wondering, why would I need this if I already have the Office home and vice versa? Well, the Office home
Great question.
does the same thing, but it accumulates from all of your services. So it's pulling in from Outlook, and I'm assuming it would pull in from Yammer as well. Well, no, Yammer's in SharePoint. So really Outlook is the outlier because Outlook doesn't have a site associated with it, right? So if you have attachments coming into an email, right? If you have attachments coming into an email or from an email, it's going to list those along with the other files that you've been working on in OneDrive or SharePoint or Yammer or Teams or elsewhere within the O365 experience. So it's kind of weird because you go to your SharePoint home, it's about sites and news, right? The containers and then the information communications. If you go to the OneDrive home, it's going to be about all the files that you've been using or other people have been using in your OneDrive and in the Teams and sites that you use on a regular basis. And if you're at the Office 365 hub, then you're talking about, take that OneDrive experience and add on top of it email, because other things could be coming from that space as well. And you have the files experience in Teams, right? Not that I ever really go to it, but when I was writing my book, I had to do a lot of investigating to figure out what do all these things do when you click the files app in Teams. And it does basically the same thing as OneDrive, right? You can look at OneDrive directly, you can look at recent, you can look at shared. And it's I guess it's, you want to give people the entry points that they need in the apps that they use, but for this one where OneDrive is an umbrella, it's difficult. So people are going to start loving the thing that they love and not realize that other things have similar features, or they might go there and go, why is this any different? It's kind of like search boxes, right? Depends on where you are. The search box does something different, except for the one on the top. But if you're in a SharePoint home and you do the SharePoint search there, that's all a SharePoint. If you go to a SharePoint site and search on that box, that's just that site. If it's hubbed, it's the whole hub, right? And that's not obvious at all to the user.
No. Which, speaking of, Microsoft feedback for you. Yeah. And, so I'll close out everything you said. Well, beautifully said. I would just like to see Microsoft being a little bit more clear cut with with what the long-term vision for home is.
Yeah.
If Teams is home, then make it home. Let's start to think about what these jumping off experiences look like from the very top, because I don't think Teams really has anything quite like this. So if the plan is to take this and imbue it into Teams, great. But, I don't see that as the long-term vision here. And just one small nitpicky thing here. One of the things I love about the office.com hub is this little plus icon here that lets you add your own custom filters. Noticeably absent.
Yeah. And I don't get that. It's all the underlying services are all the same. I don't really understand, I don't get it.
And here we are. So that's what I've got. Matt Wade, what's on your side of the fence?
So this week, the week of so today's the 19th. So sometime this week, there were some announcements about Teams Rooms. Now, I don't do a whole lot with rooms. So I find these updates interesting, but not necessarily applicable to my day-to-day life. I think the rooms and the AV aspect of conference rooms and meeting room setups and whatnot is a pretty niche area, although very big when you're in that niche, but still a niche. But there's
also want to avoid being the person who knows that stuff, because then that just becomes your whole job.
Seriously, no joke.
All jobs lead to being the AV person if you end up showing any interest in it.
Yeah, exactly. So the Teams Rooms, I had never really looked into it, but I noticed this week that there had been some hubbub about some new license models coming out. So apparently there was an announcement late this week about new licensing models for Teams Rooms. And for the most part, it's actually a price reduction, which is good news. So currently there's two plans. There is a standard plan at $15 per device per month, which offers certain features and support. And then there's a premium plan at $50 per device per month, which offers more features and probably more support.
It better.
So Microsoft has announced that there will be a new licensing model. So basically, they are going to roll both of those earlier plans into what's called Teams Room Pro, at $40 per month. And then each tenant is going to get 25 basic licenses for free. So the basic licenses are really meant to grab small, medium business interests, because they may only have 10 or 15 meeting rooms that they have to put these devices into. And the Teams room devices are the ones, like the Surface Hubs, the dedicated speaker phones, or other like Teams approved, or Teams, I forget what the term is, but
Teams certified.
Certified, thank you. Devices. So you would know what the device is if you're looking to get these devices. So it might include, a Surface Hub in somebody's office. It may not be a meeting room, but it's still, Teams room licensed device. So the basic licenses are meant to help SMBs and should provide the ability to, some of the basics, right? To schedule and join meetings, to share content, to use the whiteboard, and then some basic security management features. And then the Pro version is going to provide more. I don't know exactly what yet, because it hasn't been fully detailed. But the interesting part about this is it's supposed to come out on September 1st, right? So that's only, single digit number of days away for the most part. And this was announced by a number of different news organizations. We have a link to one of them in the show notes. But if you look for some of the key phrases from this, and on Google, you'll see a whole bunch of different, Petri, a number of other organizations that kind of follow news in the Teams industry have posted on this. Well, when I went looking for the information in the source, they all linked to the source. It's a Microsoft Docs partner blog update, and it makes zero reference to this. So my assumption is they have removed that announcement for some reason, and only like a day after it was reported by all of these news organizations. So what's interesting is that all of these news organizations, which there are at least a half a dozen articles, when you search for a key term and throw it in quotes in Google, so they're all just copying from the press release or whatever you want to call it. But within a day, there's no reference to it whatsoever. And this press release, or this docs article, isn't just about this thing. It's also about other changes that are happening in August 2022. So it's a section, presumably, that has been removed because of either a response or it went out too earlier. I'm not sure what, because I don't really follow anything in the Teams room space, especially on the MVP side. So I have no clue what's in their roadmap on a typical basis. So the interesting part here is there's all this information now published by these news organizations talking about how the current premium license is going to drop by $10 a month. That the standard one's actually, I think, going to increase. But the standard license features are probably going to be included in the upcoming basic free, which you get 25 of, and it's supposed to start on September 1st. Again, only days away, but the actual announcement doesn't exist any longer. So either they, prematurely posted, and the news articles or the news organizations haven't caught wind that it has been removed, or what. But just so you know, there is potentially a Teams room licensing change coming. It probably means less money for you. It might mean more, though, or you at least have to tweak your licensing to get off of Pro down to basic once that new model comes. So I don't know. It's a roller coaster. Who knows? We'll see what happens.
I always hate, and this is particularly true in like the tech space, where if a blog post has information that they weren't ready to put out there, or maybe the reaction wasn't what they expected, or somebody didn't clear something,
right,
they just pull it and pretend it didn't happen.
Right.
But I mean, what you've described here is exactly what does end up happening, which is the news organizations catch on, people like us start to catch on. Just removing it is bad.
Yeah, it's not even just bad practice. It's almost like negligent. You have to acknowledge it existed to say news will be coming soon, or forget that happened.
Right. Exactly. And so this is, it's disingenuous, and this is a trust issue, because if I can't trust the information that is there today will continue to be, that just makes this less of a reliable source over time.
Yeah.
One really good example of Microsoft doing it right was when they were experiencing an issue with the revamped Mac Sync client for OneDrive, when they were tapping into the M1 compatibility.
Yep.
And I think it was Omar kept going into the post and adding new information. They didn't just pull the post. They kept going in and updating it and receiving feedback and updating it. And that's the way to do it. So if you have to remove information that's no longer accurate, sure, tweak it.
I think
add a note in there.
I think that example is a perfect one. And here's why that worked. So you have to have somebody who's high enough up to say, nope, I'm taking control of this post, right?
Yes.
Omar is the vice president, right? People below him are not going to say, no, you can't do this, right? So he's high enough up that he has authority and he has, the ability to take control if he needs to. But add on to that, he loves the product, right? He is a Mac diehard. He is an Apple guy through and through. So not only does he have the authority, he has the interest. So who in the Teams room space, what corporate vice president of Teams multimedia experiences
super passionate about
who is that person and why is that person not jumping into this immediately? And, I kind of expect that kind of thing from Omar because I know that he's so passionate and that he has the role that lets him do that. And he knows customer experience from that perspective. And he's able to say and in that article, it was, Apple's updates don't really conform with the way we did this. And we didn't really have a chance to really talk to Apple about it. And they shouldn't have rolled it out so soon. They're right. It was one of those weird, just doesn't really click yet. We need to do some figuring out.
Sure.
But who is that person on the Teams meeting side or the Teams room side?
Yeah. And I think there's just got to be, much in the same way that most organizations have standards and guides with respect to the language they used, use present tense, don't use future tense, things like that. Always capitalize the P in SharePoint. When it comes to editing a blog post and removing information, acknowledging that information existed in some capacity, or acknowledging that information has been removed, and that new information will be, released as it becomes pertinent or something like that. But just pretending it doesn't exist is a bad practice. And they should make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So I thought that was something of interest for anybody who happens to be using Team Rooms. I don't really have any experience there, but it is kind of interesting to see that, the announcement went out, the people in this space jumped on it, and only 24-ish hours later, the source is just completely gone. So I'm not quite sure what the deal is there.
And when it does happen, you can bet that one of the first places you'll hear about it is right here.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, I think that about does it. Thank you so much for watching. As always, a like and a subscribe is much appreciated. Leave a comment below. We also have some links from the topics we talked about today in the show notes. Next week, we'll be discussing our Power Platform Showcase for the month of August. And Sean, thanks so much for joining me this week. And I can't wait to hang out with you and everybody again next week. Take care.
One thing I forgot to mention, for anybody that has an iPhone or a Mac, you should update your phones and laptops immediately. They found 2 separate 0 days. Apple did, and they released an emergency update. So make sure you're updating. That's all.